morning, everyone. Some of you joined us for the first session, which was the In Conversation with Judy Watson and Troy Casey, so you're starting to get familiar with Troy. But I know that a few new people have joined us for this session, so I want to reintroduce Troy. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the Walkarukaba of Gurrumbilbara and Yumbanan, who are the traditional owners of the land we're gathered on today, and acknowledge the elders past and present. Also acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are not only the first people, but they're also the first artists of this land we call Australia. Or some of us do. So I'm very pleased to welcome Troy Casey. Troy came up to represent his partner Amanda Hayman, who's the curator of Skeletons, but we also thought while he was up here it would be an incredible opportunity for him to share the work he's been doing with multiple businesses that you lead with colleagues, First Nations-led businesses. So there's Blaklash, there is Magpie Goose, which is the fashion label working with Aboriginal art centres and textile makers all across Australia. And there's also Aboriginal Art Co, which is the only Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander art centre in Meanjin, Brisbane. And I'm always trying to catch up with what you guys are up to, and I'm so excited to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hand over to you.
No worries, thanks for having me. I am just going to start off, actually I'm going to go this way because it makes more sense. So yeah, my name's Troy Casey. I'm a Kamilaroi man, so my family are from northwest New South Wales, in Collarenebri and Walgett. If you don't know those areas, you might be familiar with like Moree, Lightning Ridge, up into Tamworth, or the Brewarrina fish traps is just up the road from me in Nembar country. Yeah, I just wanted to start, you know, we've just done, Blaklash has just gone through like a bit of a rebrand process in the way in which we want to talk about the work that we do. And, you know, for us, everything, as the bottom tagline says, it always starts with country. And country, you know, is absolutely everything. It's, everything is interconnected. The animate, the inanimate, and the people who activate those places and spaces. So just before I start also, I'll put this in full screen when I actually start, but I just want to acknowledge country as well. You know, being a visitor here, it was great to meet Auntie Ros last night and have yarns with her, but I just want to make sure that, you know, I pay respect as well to this country and the ancestors who have cared for this place since time immemorial. And also like my elders of other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are in the room today, without the work that they have done, there's no way I'd be sitting here in this room, being able to have the conversations that we've had with Judy, but also the privileged position and platform that we have now to really turn the dial on ensuring that, as I said in this last conversation, that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture is celebrated, acknowledged, championed, heroed, and elevated as part of all of the things that I do on projects that I work on. But hopefully it touches all of the people that we work with. And some of the things we say about Magpie Goose is you might wear the shirt to a party on the weekend or a wedding or a barbecue, and someone might ask you, oh, that's a beautiful top, tell me a bit more about that. You start to talk about an Aboriginal social enterprise that centres First Nations stories from remote communities around the country. A place like Columbaroo, I'll use Judy's top for example. A place like, here we go. I knew you'd want to get up and to show everyone. A place like, you know, Columbaroo up in the Kimberley, up in far north Western Australia, to tell stories about the Macassans who traded with Aboriginal people way before, first colonisation here, and understand the history that exists in this place, but also then share those stories with more people in an informal setting. And I think the same can be said about this exhibition. Please don't leave the conversation in this room. Please take it out to broader community, people that you catch up with for a coffee, explain the exhibition, explain these histories, and just have a conversation about it, because as we said, it's the only way to move forward. So I'm going to do something that's like cringy for me, is like play a video of us, which is like weird. Not only is it a video of us, we like won this award, so it's like super weird. I'm definitely, like, I'm okay talking in public, but I feel like I'm a bit shame when it comes to being a big noter. So anyways, we won Creative Australia's Partnership Award recently, Amanda and I as individuals, which is quite lovely. And I guess it's individuals who are, I guess, showing leadership in the way in which that we work in enterprise, but also working like with philanthropy and government and corporate clients to elevate First Nation stories. So here's the weird part. I'm going to let it rip. At its core, everything that we do is about providing opportunities for other community members or reaching out with our hand to bring them up and showcase their stories on our platform too.
It's really exciting stuff that's putting lots of really intelligent black mob in the one space, and then, magic happens.
I mean, the amounts of money that I give don't make huge differences, but they also show a sort of example that it can give to other people. The arts bring so much to our lives. You can look at an object and you get pleasure from it every time you look at it. It brings something more to your soul.
James and Diana were both great supporters of the arts. So together they formed this great partnership and created a wonderful legacy of philanthropic giving.
The support has been fundamental for us to be able to build our capacity. To see our dancers on a stage in the Opera House was a dream come true.
All of us at the foundation have had our lives enriched through cultural philanthropy.
Is there a risk in looking after an artist? Yes, but what you do is you want to bring that risk into your business, and you want to bring that creativity and innovation into your business, because you'll be a better business because of it. The best way to have an impact of any kind is to get involved in it. It's not bad to say yes, it's good to say yes. It helps. Say yes.
Anyways, that wasn't the proper video, so I don't feel as embarrassed or more embarrassed that I didn't play the right video. I don't know anymore. I'll find it later, but there's one that's just about us and all the work that we do, but shit, I'll just explain it. You heard me say, all the work that we do is about creating platforms for other members of community to tell their stories. And, Amanda and I work tirelessly to ensure that it's not about us, actually. And like, our businesses are always based on reciprocity and relationships and community impact. And so whilst we have a very particular skill set, none of our businesses would exist without the broader community and artists and elders that we work with. And so, I know what I'm good at, Amanda knows what she's really good at, and we just try and do what we're good at and bring other people along for the journey with us. I'll talk about Aboriginal Art Co first, because really I think that was the kind of reason why we won the Creative Australia Partnership Award, which is around philanthropy and using business for good, really, in the arts. And so this is actually the last company that we started. It's been around for about 3.5 to 4 years. It's about 5 years in the making, though. So it's an Aboriginal not-for-profit organisation that's got DGR status, that's on the Register of Cultural Organisations. It is about heroing and championing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art. this organisation, the premise for it was off the back of the federal government inquiry into fake arts. And at the time, the statistics suggested that 80% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander products that were out on the market were not made by Aboriginal people. And so fake art harms culture. It also is a multi-billion-dollar industry that Aboriginal people weren't necessarily receiving any of the benefits from. And so Amanda and I were like, isn't that, it's crazy to start with. Then we started to think about, well, I wonder why, why is that? And on the Queen Street Mall, which is, where most tourists would visit in Brisbane, definitely, the main strip, there's about 3 or 4 shops along there, like the Australian Gift and G'day Mate and all of those kind of places that were selling those types of wares. We asked a few more questions, and Steph Parkin, who's a intellectual property lawyer and specialises in Indigenous cultural intellectual property, we were kind of bamboozled about it. At that time we were running a retail store as well, selling all of our mates' products and wares and things like that. And the ACCC has legislation that says, because we were like, oh, that's it's a lie, it's fake. And the ACCC has rules and legislation that says, as long as on the back it says made in China, it's not telling a lie. So they can actually just replicate Indigenous cultural stories onto these objects. And as long as they have the little sticker on the back that says it's made in China or Indonesia, they are allowed to sell their wares. And so there's been a big shift in this movement around Indigenous cultural intellectual property, because it shouldn't matter, it should only be made by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, those cultural stories and types and styles of painting. Anyways, long story short, we're like, well, where do you go and buy real stuff from in Brisbane? And Michael Connolly has a shop out at Redcliffe. Amazing. The first didgeridoo I ever bought was off Michael Connolly when I was, in primary school. My mum bought it off him at South Bank Markets. And he has a store out in Redcliffe, and that's probably the only place that we knew of. And we were like, well, we're also curators. I think we could combine this retail space that we have and a gallery. And the whole premise of this is that, and I loved you reading the bio out of it, is people know that they can come and buy authentic and ethically sourced Aboriginal art and products. And, not to run down all commercial galleries, but there are certainly some players in that game who are not probably ethically sourcing or sharing profit appropriately with Aboriginal artists. So we started Aboriginal Art Co as a result of that. And now I think over its 5 years in the making, it's operated for about 3 years. I mean, we've sold over $750,000 worth of art and probably $1.2 million worth of products. And so if you do the math, that's lots. And then 70% of all of that money goes to Aboriginal art centres, artists, communities, and the people who have made those products. The truth behind the arts and arts workers needs to be told as well. Amanda almost works for free in this organisation at the moment while it's being established. And I reckon Amanda and I have probably sunk about $150,000 or $200,000 worth of our own money into establishing it and getting it started. But now we're really seeing the benefits of what we've set up for a legacy for us and our community. This notion of Aboriginal Art Co is that it could be a franchise model. There could be one in every capital city. It's hub and spoke. We sell art from all around Australia and then support local artists as well. The next thing I'll talk about is Magpie Goose. And so Magpie Goose has got a really interesting story. It was established by 2 non-Indigenous women who worked in the Northern Territory, who were lawyers, and the other one just helped support community enterprise. And so they were seeing all these fabrics, beautiful fabrics being made, but not really seeing many clothes being made with the fabrics. I think lots of, people would buy the fabric with some really good will to make some garments, but maybe not all of them were converting them. And so these two ladies said, like, wouldn't it be amazing if we can figure out how we can turn these beautiful textiles into clothing that people can access. So they were around for about 3 years and built the business to be quite sustainable. But we met them in about their second year. They came to Brisbane and did a pop-up, and we told them all about who we are and what we do. And they were really amazing women. And I sort of mentioned while we were having a beer with them, like, do you think like it should be Aboriginal owned? I just sort of posed the question. And they were like, absolutely. Like, our intention for this is that at some point we step away from it and someone else takes it. And I walked out of the bar and I said to Amanda, that's ours. We're gonna own that company. And she was like, yeah, good on you, big noter. Which I do in my own private home. But 2.5 years later, we got a phone call from them. Well, they actually texted us and said, hey, got something we want to talk to you about. Do you have time? And I said, I told you, Amanda. She's like, they won't want to talk about that. And I put it on speaker and they're like, we want to give you the business or sell you the business. And I was like, anyways. Then 3 months later, we took over and we've owned it now for coming on 4 years. We've continued to increase the amount of products that were sold and the amount of impact that it creates. It's now in its life provided $750,000+ worth of licensing payments back to community artists in remote communities. So it's again, maybe some truths, passion project. What it is the ability for it to create opportunities for remote artists to have different income streams, really, and diversify the way that they work. The most recent collection here on the screen is from Awempa Twatch, which is Hidden Valley Town Camp in Alice Springs. And we were out there recently, and the shirt that you're wearing is around Desert Rain. So if you want to get up and do the dance, you have to get in front of the Yeah, I know. I should have a rack here as well. That's why I brought the online store up for everyone to see. So that one, we were just out there and we actually got to see rain in Alice Springs last week, which was really beautiful and really important. The Hidden Valley Town Camp is it's inside Alice Springs, and when you go out there, Alice is such a beautiful place and such a, I don't know, it evokes strong emotions for anyone that goes there, Indigenous or non-Indigenous. It's a magical place. You're in the city and it feels kind of like, yes, it's remote town. And then you go to the town camps and you realise that like the poverty that exists still 5 minutes out of a city centre in that area is like extreme. And so our idea is always to try and collaborate with community organisations that actually need a chance to show what they can do. And the Columbaroo collection that Judy is wearing currently is from Columbaroo, so it was a women's centre. So it's not an art centre necessarily. We work with communities and community people to create things that they would never imagine. It's a social enterprise. Amanda also works kind of for free there. And that's really hard for us because, you know, you work so hard and like, I'll get to the business that pays for all of the bills in a minute. Because we're clever, we have a commercial enterprise that is profitable and is doing amazing things that supports us to do initiatives that are about community. And I keep talking about reciprocity, and that is so critical to the way that we operate. You know, at the moment, across Blaklash, Magpie Goose, and Aboriginal Art Co, we employ 20 Aboriginal staff. Probably more actually, it's probably 25 because Blaklash has grown dramatically since I last quoted those numbers. But we employ 25 Aboriginal staff across those businesses in a range of different positions and give them a range of different opportunities. But yeah, I think I'll talk about this one because Blaklash is, has grown pretty dramatically recently, and it really feeds into this notion that I've been talking about championing and celebrating story of First Nations people and communities. And actually, before I kick into it, Judy mentioned last night, and we talked about it before, like the dinosaur water that she referenced from the groundwater on Wanyee country, because it's so old and ancient. Well, here's an interesting little graph, and it doesn't have all of the things on it, but, sorry, I have to do this so I can read it properly. So, I don't know if you can see a little dot on the end of this from where you're sitting, but that last line to the arrow, not 100% accurate, it's probably even smaller than you could imagine on this scale, is when Australia was invaded. Let's go back here to one of the kind of oldest recorded sites in Australia, 65,000 plus years. It's a rock shelter in Arnhem Land up in the Northern Territory, and it's got grinding grooves and stones that are dated back 65,000 years. If we go to Juukan Gorge that Judy mentioned that got blown up by Rio, there's 40,000 years. If we go a little bit, about 45 to 50,000 years. If we go to 40,000 years, Brewarrina fish traps from near where my family's from. And then here, 25,000 years is the start of the last ice age. So like, go back that way, you know, that's a long way. Mammoths go extinct about here. The end of the ice age is here. Gummandjuru, which is just outside of Toowoomba. I'm just using examples that I know of as well. Gummandjuru, which is a rock formation just outside of Toowoomba, 7,000 years old. The pyramids slide in right at the end near Australia at 5,000 years old. And then here you get to where first impact happened. And so when you start to look at this in terms of existence and history and continuous occupation and cultural practice, it's pretty impressive. And I don't think everyone really understands the extent. I think 65,000 years is a hard thing to grasp, given we only live for under 100, most of us. Aboriginal people less than everyone else as well. But when you start to think about how much story is in there, it's pretty special. And that's what we're trying to do at Blaklash, is to uncover those stories of place and bring them to life in a range of different ways. You know, for us, it's country-centred design and cultural placemaking, which is, I guess, a newer sort of way of thinking about the built environment. And at Blaklash, we have 3 graduates of architecture, a landscape architect, 2 interior designers. We've got designers who specialise in public art. We've got project managers who help fabricate and make public art. We do strategy. I lead up community engagement, and we curate public art master plans, etc. as well. So, you know, it's about thinking about local context, working through local protocols. So as like all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff, we know the process and we know what our responsibility is working on someone else's country. And through that process of working with traditional custodians and families and elders who have, you know, contemporary connections to those places, we unpack histories and we curate narratives that find their way into co-design processes in the built environment. And so our team has grown 5 more since this photo. I feel like I have to get a new staff photo every bloody 3 months at the moment because it just feels like we're growing so quickly. But we have an amazing team, and not only do we have a team of all of these kind of design professionals, there's Nari Blow, Dr. Nari Blow here, who we've brought into our team as a health specialist. So she's a doctor, one that can prescribe you medicine, for example, and is a First Nations health practitioner. And so we've been working on hospital projects and delivering, health design frameworks for Queensland Government. And so we always want First Nations people, like if we do an education project, brother up the back, we'll be ringing you. Because what we need our mob who are experts, not only in their field, but understand our culture and ways of being and knowing. There's lots of us now from all different parts of the country. And so the grey shaded areas are all the different countries in which our staff are from. And the reason why I always like to show this is, yes, we're diverse, but we're diverse in our arguments in the office as well, which create the best work. If you're the sole voice of Aboriginal people inside your organisation or inside a business, it can be a bit of an echo chamber. And I feel sometimes we can maybe get complacent in what we think what is the best outcome for our community. And so at the moment, what we're doing is we're pushing each other to strive for the very best outcomes. And, without that team, I think, you don't continue to grow, you start to plateau, and that's really special. We work all around the eastern coast of Australia. We've just started an office in Melbourne, and I have staff that are on the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast as well. So Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Brisbane and Melbourne presence. But we work in, up to, in Arakoon, Cape Tribulation in far north Queensland, Yarrabah, and then all in the urban settings as well. Our approach is not to sit in the middle as some sort of gatekeeper, but actually to facilitate conversation and design translation. And so what we share with traditional custodians in that sense, probably just as also just can clear up that when we're working on someone's country and we're telling stories of that place, traditional custodians who have authority to speak to those stories are the people that we work with. And so in that sense, we share cultural experience as Aboriginal people, and traditional owners share with us their knowledge and their priorities as to what they want to see on projects that we're delivering. And we do that through engagement and co-design processes with them. And then what we do with the primary consultant, like an architect or a designer or a developer, is co-design also with our industry experience in those sectors to create culturally informed strategies and design responses in co-design and collaboration with them. And so there's this kind of figure eight happening here, where we're working with community, we're working with designers, we're bringing that back to community and creating a really genuine and authentic process where community feel like they have agency in the project. Again, our role is just about translating things, and it's about understanding cultural nuance and creating design responses that are also culturally appropriate. And lots of traditional custodians aren't designers, so they don't actually know what the possibilities are. They understand what they've been able to get previously, but we're trying to push that idea into much more sophisticated design outcomes that go beyond just art, but are about integrating art in really meaningful and sophisticated ways. I'll just talk about this quite quickly, and then, I don't know, I feel like I can always talk forever, so I better watch myself. I've talked about reciprocity a lot, and impact, and that is, it might be my downfall, but I'm happy if that is. I'm all about sharing. For me, as I said, we have a particular skill set, and we've been able to get into a very interesting position through the work that we do to create a platform for others. And while we're being successful, and generally in this colonial construct, success is generally attached to profit and money, Our obligation is to ensure that we're sharing as much of that as possible with our community, but also providing opportunities for them to grow professionally, join our team, and or ensure that we're providing culturally safe places for young blackfellas to come into these spaces and feel welcome and safe to explore what it is to be Aboriginal in this space, and to be Aboriginal in this like contemporary urban setting that we live in. So through our work, we've created the Blaklash Community Fund, which is not like a not-for-profit thing. It's just like we put aside profit from our business into a community fund, which is to fund a whole range of different things. We will always get calls from people that are going into the Murray Carnival that need socks and jerseys and bits and pieces, and so there's a pocket for that. But there's also a pocket of money there for community organisations who just want to have a bush tucker garden out the back of their elders' organisation. And so we do pro bono services to design it, and then we'll help build it as well. We do lots of pro bono work, free design work for community, particularly in regional and remote areas. When the Aboriginal organisation is paying for our services, it's a very different rate to when a corporate is paying for our services. And so that offsets each other, as you can imagine. But we've also developed two new scholarships. So one is a built environment scholarship at QUT. It's $10,000 a year, and I've committed to that for like 10 years. We currently have a Torres Strait Islander interior designer as part of that scholarship program in his second year. We also have an art curator scholarship at UQ Art Museum. That's a 3-year commitment that I've just ticked over. They will start their second year next year. And again, it's about really just figuring out what are the ways that I can give back to community through what we've been able to achieve. I think like even within all of our projects, we're trying to find other ways to create economic opportunities for community. So there's the direct impact that we can have through our process, but also working with like developers. How are they employing other Indigenous businesses? How are they writing into their tender documentation, education, training, commitments? And we're having like lots of success in that space at the moment. You know, leveraging government policies, but explaining to developers that like those policies exist and they're not necessarily doing what they should be doing. You have an obligation and a responsibility to turn the dial up on that as well. Just a couple of quick examples of like projects we're working on. So Victoria Park Barambin's a master plan of one of the largest urban green spaces in the Southern Hemisphere, I'm going to say, but definitely in Australia. It's kind of like, what's the park in Central Park in New York? It's like Australia's kind of version of that. And so it's an old golf course that we have been working with Urbis and Brisbane City Council on designing and developing like Indigenous design principles and opportunities for community to activate those spaces. We recently developed, and you know, it's caught up in amazing red tape land at the moment, but the Brisbane 2032 Connecting with Country strategy, which is for the Olympic Games. So all of the Olympic venues and villages that will be designed have a First Nations design strategy attached to them. So everyone that will come to those spaces and places will be able to see and feel and experience First Nation stories and culture in those spaces. That's a pretty big project. And as a result, we did so much engagement for that project because there's venues in Cairns. It's about 10 different traditional custodian groups that we had to work with to understand how they want to work on these projects, what the engagement process will be, some of the outcomes that they could imagine as a result of it. And it's not only about design. You know, it's about employment, it's about training, it's about economics. Time, okay. I've probably got about 5 minutes, I reckon. Oh, 10, excellent. So we work from things like master plans of parks through to strategies, through to like big commercial towers. So this commercial tower is part of the Cross River Rail project. It's 101 Albert Street. So Cross River Rail and Queensland Investment Corporation, QIC, has the responsibility of everything that exists as a precinct above Cross River Rail. And so we've worked with them on this first project, but I'm about to sign a contract on Tuesday that will lock us into working with them on every precinct, Cross River Rail precinct in Brisbane, which is about 3 years of upfront work to get all the strategies and frameworks down, and like 30 years of projects. So like it's pretty amazing that like, you know, a small Aboriginal business is being able to kind of create this level of influence over major infrastructure projects in Brisbane. I mentioned Dr. Nari earlier. We also this year developed, didn't change the title, classic. The First Nations Design Framework, which is for Queensland Health. So all health infrastructure in the future now also has a design framework to create safer and more culturally appropriate spaces for community. You know, when we think about access to healthcare and the change that that can make for our community, you know, lots of our mob are scared to go to the hospital because that's where you go to die. But how do we change that narrative? And how do we create like culturally appropriate spaces for community, not only to feel safe and welcome when they arrive, but for cultural process and protocol to happen as things happen inside that hospital too. So like, what does birthing on country suites start to look like? Are there appropriate places and spaces for sorry ceremonies to happen before people leave the hospital, and so on and so forth. So this is another, you know, significant body of work. So yeah, that's it. But I guess what I will leave everyone on is like, no matter who you are, where you come from, what you do, you can all actually make a little difference in the way that our community feels acknowledged and heard in this country. And everyone has a responsibility to shift the narrative and shift the dialogue. We're doing it in a range of different ways. It can be by supporting artists, it can be by supporting, you know, businesses, or it can be just having that conversation at the barbecue about Indigenous issues. But, you know, at the end of the day, we all have that responsibility to make change. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Troy. Would you be open to a couple of questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If I don't choke and die.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe give you a second.
I might have to use that health facility in a second.
So inspiring to see the work you do and the practice that you have in doing it, and the protocols. Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here because there's lots of new things on the horizon in the First Nations space, and a lot of the time people come to Umbrella to help, and we refer people back to the right people. And yeah, the more we know and understand and see how other people are approaching these things, the more benefits it can happen for our community and the growth and respect for First Nations arts and culture. So, is there any questions for Troy?
Hi, Troy. Huge,
Claire.
massive fan of yourself and Amanda and the amazing change that you're doing for this particular generation and the legacy that you're leaving. I'm a bit greedy. I've got two questions.
Go for it.
In terms of protecting and growing legacy, we're on the precipice right now of such an economic downturn. What advice could you give for how do we lead our own individuals individual enterprises through a time of uncertainty and change, but come out thriving from it. And the other question is...
Big question. Big question.
Big question. The other question was, how do you balance burnout and or your family responsibilities and community responsibilities?
Two really big questions. The first one is like, if you've got the answer, can you tell me too? No, honestly, we're struggling too, you know. I think if Blaklash didn't exist, and we're in like this interesting niche where development will continue to happen, particularly in southeast Queensland because of the Olympics and because of the city's just growing. And so we're in I guess an interesting pocket where that isn't going to stop. But what I will say is before we started working in the built environment, there was that thing that happened where everyone got a cough and had to stay at home. And at that point in time, we were curating exhibitions and running events and activations, and we weren't working in the built environment. And so at that point in time, we started to think about like, where else can we have impact? And so we're always, and like when COVID happened, it was like, well, we had like 3 or 4 major projects that were festivals, like major markets and big activations that were like the core of our business. And so all of them got cancelled immediately. And so in the same sense, we were feeling like, oh wow, what are we gonna do? And I think you've always just got to be like interested in figuring out what that trajectory is for you and thinking about and exploring like multiple revenue streams as an artist. You know, it's, you know, like you've got, I think Vernon talks about this a lot as well as like, you know, he's making, you know, big major artworks that, you know, only sell, you know, might have one major exhibition a year, and then you might get a good chunk of money then if the works sell. But what's actually paying for your bread and butter and milk and petrol? And so for him, like him and his wife have a design agency. They also make T-shirts that's like right there. That is just an alternative revenue stream. It's about creating and making your art accessible to people. It's also about making a statement, but it also allows a trickle effect of revenue to come into his business, and then allows him to feel a bit more comfortable in making the work to sell in those exhibitions. I don't know, I think, like I've always just said yes to everything as well when I started my business. I don't know if that's the best advice, but like what happened was we said yes to some public art projects, like doing a bit of curatorial on them. And then literally all of the projects I just showed you like came off the back of that. So we created, the way we curate is always like site specific. It's about local stories. It's why we love working with Judy, because her work is very much about that in the public realm. And so working with traditional owners, understanding what the narrative of that place was, and created a public art master plan. And then the architects were like, that's amazing. Can that be the whole site narrative and that inform all of our design? And I was like, yes. Do I get to put extra money on my invoice or something because of that? Anyways, and then within a week, I literally had 10 architecture practices in Brisbane ringing me up saying like, I hear you do this thing, we want you on this project. And it just like, one little thing just went, so like, I think just like be open to saying yes. The burnout question. So last Monday I did Canberra. I've said this like 5 times now, but I did Canberra to Melbourne to Sydney to Alice Springs to Brisbane to Cairns to Brisbane to Townsville in the last fortnight. And so I am traveling a lot. We are working a lot, but I don't know, find something you love and it doesn't necessarily feel a whole lot like work. is you know, that old phrase. I haven't figured it out yet. I'll just be super honest. You know, I think I get, at times I get super tired and I'm like, I'm on the brink of something, and I'll just kind of rein it in, have a day off, go for a swim in the pool, just do something that just kind of feels like refreshes you, and then just take a big breath and go again. But that's probably something I need to work on and get much better at. But Amanda and I are gluttons for punishment, so we just love it. And like Charlie, so we've got a young boy who's 4.5, almost 5. He's just part of it. He's at openings, he's been to Kayak, DAF and Desert Mob this year with us. And so he just comes. And he's getting a pretty awesome experience and a really deadly art collection as well. But I think it's just about like, it's our life, you know? The hardest part about the burnout question is like, because we're Aboriginal and you know, I'm Aboriginal, Amanda's Aboriginal, Charlie's Aboriginal, all of my staff are Aboriginal, 90% of my friends are Aboriginal, you know, like, we don't really get to switch off from work because it's all about culture and expression. And then you go home and you're having those conversations with friends on the weekend, you're having those conversations. So, you know, when they say it's a full-time job, it's actually just our life is encompassed in, I don't know, just, I guess, but I would not have it any other way. I would never change what we're doing or how we've got there. And we've made heaps of mistakes along the way. And I'm sure we'll make more. I think we have a set of values which is about creating the best future for us and our family and our community as possible through the work that we do. That gets me up every morning.
Thanks, Troy. Is there any other questions? Might be a nice note to finish on. Quite inspiring.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me up here, Umbrella. Like, I've been admiring your work from a distance, Kate, and just appreciate the opportunity to have these platforms to share a bit about us and who we are and what we do. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Troy. Also, we look forward to continuing those conversations and more growing through the networks up here. And yeah, thank you so much. And safe trip home to catch up with family and tune off for a bit.
I've got to. So one of the things I do for Charlie when I travel without him is spoiled. So bear with me. Is if I go away for a couple of nights, I always bring him back like a little Lego thing, and so I went away for like 5 nights the other week in a row, and so I brought him a bigger Lego thing, and I only made a third of it before I had to come here, so I'm going to make the rest of it this afternoon. So that's the burnout thing. I love Lego as well. Yeah, build things, you know, you forget about everything, you just look into the next page to keep building. It's great. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.